Hey everyone, it's Allie, and as we're getting closer and closer to Path of Exile 2, I've been seeing people ask questions about some of the core systems, all the way from new players to veterans of PoE 1. And what I wanted to do today was discuss all of the skill changes, as well as give you an overview of how skills are going to be working in PoE 2, just so we're all as well informed as possible walking into early access. Skills have come a pretty long way in comparison to how they work in PoE 1. In PoE 1, you used to have sockets on your gear where you socketed in your skills, as well as supports that synergize with your skill to either change how it works fundamentally or make it do more damage. In PoE 2, there's now going to be a separate window that is going to be completely separated from any of your gear. In here, you're going to have 10 slots in total, allowing you to run 10 skills of your choice. In some cases, you will have meta skills where, for example, Blasphemy will allow you to then link other skills to it, such as curses, for the Blasphemy itself to then make into an aura. But in most cases, especially for all the skills you're going to be using to do damage, it's simply just going to be a skill they then link supports to in the sockets that it provides to fundamentally change how the skill works. Each skill is going to have a certain amount of sockets that it has available for supports. These are going to drop with 2 sockets at a minimum, and through currency that you'll be able to either find on the ground or be able to buy from other people, you'll be able to add additional sockets to it, meaning in total you'll have 5 sockets available for you to put supports for whatever skill you're playing. Instead of skills and supports dropping throughout the world, instead, you're now going to find general skill gems, which either will allow you to just take a skill gem of your choosing from an interface, or a general support gem, which will then also just allow you to take a support of your choosing. These are going to drop at a specific level, meaning if you find a level 6 skill gem, you'll get whatever skill you choose at level 6. Supports, on the other hand, while they used to gain experience in PoE 1, no longer are going to have any sort of experience gain at all. What you see is what you get, and it's what it'll be for the rest of forever. For example, multiple projectiles will just always give you 20% less damage to additional projectiles and 20% less attack and cast speed. One other interesting thing that is changing, and I personally am a really big fan of, is that instead of the supports having specific attribute requirements to be able to equip them, it simply adds an attribute requirement to your main skill gem. In the case of multiple projectiles, it adds a requirement 5 dex. So, for example, if you were to have something like an arc, which requires 64 int at level 10, and you link a multiple projectiles to it, it would then require you to have 64 int and 5 dexterity to use the skill if multiple projectiles worked with the support. That is one very important thing to mention about this system, is that not all supports are going to necessarily work with all skills. When you get to choose a support, the interface will specifically allow you to look at all supports that actually do work with the skill that you want to pick it for, meaning that you don't have to do any sort of guesswork if a support is going to interact with a skill or not. In the case of Arc, it would not, as Arc is not a projectile and it does not have the projectile tag, meaning that the multiple projectiles do literally nothing, and not add the 5 dexterity requirement onto Arc at all, or reduce the cast speed they'd have with it. There's also going to be another restriction on this, that you can only equip each support gem once. This means if you wanted to use Chain on your Arc, for example, you would not be able to use Chain on a different skill. This restriction honestly isn't going to be too restrictive, given that we are getting substantially more support gems in PoE 2 than we ever had in PoE 1, allowing you to make more interesting decisions on how to put together your skills, rather than running the same generic damage or utility supports in everything that you're playing. The other thing to mention about support gems is going to be that you're going to have a cap to how many of each color you're going to be able to equip. At the top of the skill panel, there will be a number that is going to show you how many of each support gem you can equip. This is going to be able to be increased by your attributes. So for example, if your cap is 10 intelligence support gems, you can only equip 10 of them in your skills, and you'd need to increase your intelligence to then get an extra cap to be able to equip another support gem. This, in my opinion, is not going to be too big of an issue, as with the passive tree changes, all travel nodes are now going to give you the option to choose what attributes they give you, meaning if you have a bunch of intelligence points and your cap on how many intelligence supports you can use is too high, you simply just change some of your intelligence points on your passive tree to dexterity, for example, to get an additional socket if you needed a specific dexterity gem. This might be a little bit restrictive while you're leveling, as you're not going to have that many attributes, but it seems like this support gem cap doesn't scale, meaning it should be the same amount of attribute required per point. So once you get to endgame, where you have a lot more attributes, it shouldn't be too difficult and too restrictive to either shift some attributes around or just not worry about this cap at all. Another thing to mention is that here, instead of now holding your gems, is instead going to have sockets for you to be able to equip runes in them. These runes are going to give you various stats based off of what item you equip it in, and presumably some of these runes are going to have attributes on them, meaning if you can't necessarily fix it through your repository, you can potentially fix it through a rune on a piece of gear. The last thing that we need to mention about gems is going to be the separation of mana into an additional stat called Spirit. In PoE 1, you had to reserve a portion of your mana to gain access to auras and permanent buffs on you, but now your mana pool is completely free to be used for nothing but spellcasting, and instead you're now going to have Spirit, which is going to be what you reserve your auras and buffs on instead. You're going to start with 0 Spirit when you begin a character, and there are going to be plenty of bosses throughout the acts that are going to give you a permanent increase to your maximum spirit. We don't know exactly how much spirit you're going to have once you get to endgame. We are thinking anywhere between 180 to 200. We've heard different numbers, but no matter what, you should be able to use at minimum 2 to 3 different spirit gems in most builds, as long as you're not using the very heavy ones. These spirit gems are going to very clearly tell you how much spirit they require to use. In the case of Archmage, we would need 100 spirit to be able to turn it on. And as long as I don't change how much spirit I have and do not go under the amount required, the Archmage will always be active. One thing that could potentially mess up with this is going to be weapon swapping, as we are now going to get the new scepter base types, which give us additional spirit, allow us to run more spirit based skills. And if you were to have a scepter and then a weapon swap to, for example, a staff, you would lose the spirit, which would then potentially turn off some of the auras that you're trying to equip. There is going to be an interface, which we unfortunately have not seen yet, as it wasn't finished for any of the content creator playthroughs. But in this interface, you'll be able to very specifically set up exactly which auras and spirit gems are going to be active for each weapon swap, meaning it should not be an issue at all for you to potentially have a scepter and have your spirits change on the fly in combat. One stat that we don't know if is going to be in PoE 2 yet is spirit cost reduction, which would then make it so your spirit gems require less spirit overall. We know this is going to be a stat for minions, so we can extrapolate that this might also be a stat that comes back for actual gems. The final thing to mention about this is that spirit is also going to be how you turn on your permanent minions. So in the case of skeleton, for example, you could spend a little bit of spirits to get 1 skeleton, but if you want to have 2 skeletons active at all time, you can simply just summon another one and it would consume the same amount of spirit again. This means for any sort of minion build, you're going to really want to scale as much spirit as possible because you could theoretically have 1,000,000 skeletons active if you had enough spirit for it. But that also does mean that minion builds are now going to have to make a trade-off between either running more spirit skills and summoning more minions at once. And that is pretty much everything that we need to cover on skill gems. I hope this video helped you get a better understanding of how they're going to work. And I hope that this will hopefully help some people not have to struggle when PoE 2 does come out. If you have any further questions, feel free to leave a comment in the comments below, and I'd be more than happy to help you. I also stream on Twitch every single day, so feel free to come by Twitch and ask any of your questions there. And with all said, kitties, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.